Welcome into the Fantasy Sanctuary. It is mock draft season. We're right in the thick of rookie hype season. So I've assembled some of my favourite fantasy football analysts to take a look at how these rookies are being valued. First up, we've got one of the titans of the industry, Pat Fitzmaurice, managing editor of FantasyPros and BettingPros, one of the best player rankers in the game and a true gent of the fantasy community. Pat, how are you doing? Are you surviving all the craziness of pre-draft content?
Oh, doing well, Tom. Thank you for having me. I am so far, and I'm actually getting pretty excited about the draft now that we're just about a month away or so. Like the fever is building.
Next up, we've got another Fantasy Pros contributor, a man who possibly spends even more time on Twitter than I do. If he's not talking fantasy football, then he's probably coming up with some absurd trick shot challenges at his day job to avoid doing his work. Joe Pepe, you're firing out mock drafts left, right, and center. You're a huge Eagles fan. Tell me what you want the Eagles to do in that first round.
Oh, man, I don't know. I still think I want to trade back out of 10. I don't really like what's falling to us at 10, but if you're going to leave me at 10, give me Peter. Give me the tackle because he's got the short arms. Swing him into guard if I need to. Then I have a little bit of depth at guard. Jurgens can move the guard, and we can have some center back and forth with Jurgens. We got a lot we could do, but move us back if we can. Put me into the teens somewhere. Teens in the 30 pick, I'll be really happy.
Rich man problems when it comes to the Eagles. Lastly, and by no means least, Chris Reelfs, one of the nicest and smartest guys on Twitter. He does some great work over Player Profiler. He's constantly putting out really insightful thoughts onto Twitter. I always stop to read Chris's tweets when I see him. Chris, do you enjoy this time of year more than the actual season?
Oh, it's a close one. Always the debates and everything like that, challenging other thoughts. I love just, getting everyone's input and trying to filter through the noise as we navigate the off season and all the free agency acquisitions and whatnot. I'm looking forward to
it. Brilliant. Okay, so the way it's going to work, Superflex Titan Premium, we're going to run through the first couple of rounds. Joe's up first, then Pat, and then Chris. We'll keep rolling like that. I'm going to throw in some Dynasty strategy questions every now and again, and you guys feel free to butt in if you don't like somebody's pick and tell them what they should be doing there. Joe, you've got the 101. I've known you long enough to know that you throw in a wild card every now and again. Have you got one for us here, or do you think you just have to stick with the consensus of Bijan Robinson?
I think you got to stick with Bijan. Unless you're crazy, I really don't have a better way to put that. You go somewhere else, but you got to stick with him. He's the complete back. He's the guy that you build your team around, that you build your scheme around. He's generational. There's not much I really have to talk about here. He's just complete. And when you have somebody like that, you can't skip over him. There's nobody over here. There's no Peyton Manning type quarterback. There's nobody like that. So just give me Bijan and we could just move right on to 1-2.
Is there any landing spot where Bijan could land where you wouldn't take him at the 101?
So like we were saying before the show, he would have to land in like Seattle, and then Anthony Richardson would have to get picked 1 by the Panthers for me to flip that and put Anthony Richardson 1. It's the only way. Like it would have to be a situation where there's a back like Kenneth Walker, there's somebody with enough talent, maybe even the Patriots with Ramondre Stevenson, and again, Anthony Richardson would have to be the first pick. Otherwise, I'm still sticking with Bijan.
Okay, yeah, that all seems fair enough. Pat, I think, this kind of conversation, it's not very different. A lot of people are certain that Bijan's going to be taken at the 101. So really, the draft kind of starts at the 102. And here, it's just that kind of juggling back and forth of which quarterback you like most. Is there a particular one who you're higher than the others?
Yeah, Tom, I think for the combination of maybe the safest floor and still a lofty ceiling, I'm going to go with CJ Stroud. And right now, CJ Stroud he is the odds-on favorite to be the number 1 pick, going to the Panthers first overall. So I think he has a little bit better, more than a little bit better of a college resume than Anthony Richardson. I mean, he's gotten it done as a pro-style passer. And I think they like that he is, this guy who can read the field and make anticipatory throws and do all the things they're going to ask him to do in the NFL. And then he's bigger than Bryce Young, who's the other very polished quarterback in this class. Like Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, super toolsy, super talented. But Young and Stroud are the pro-ready guys who I think can step in and be starters from day one. And I'm a little worried about Bryce Young's size, so Stroud would be the guy for me.
Yeah, I think all that kind of sounds completely fair. I mean, you look at Stroud and like you say, he just he did it in a pro offense and he looked really good. And whilst he might not have that elite ceiling of some of the kind of quarterbacks that we take early on in these drafts, he looks like a really can't miss prospect. Chris, over to you at the 103. We kept you waiting for your first pick. It's quite a contrast this year to last year's rookie draft when there wasn't much in the way of quarterbacks at the top. Would you be hitting auto smash on a quarterback here, or do you think it's early? Is there enough ambiguity that you could start thinking about another position?
Yeah, that's a good question. I'm personally going with Bryce Young here, as Pat was talking about, the other of the polished passers in this class. I get the upside that Anthony Richardson possesses. That's undoubtedly so. My thing with that is that I believe it was Jordan from the Football Guys, and he talked a little bit about, correct me if I'm wrong, I forget who, but I believe it was him, and he was talking about the Jalen Hurts comps in previous years and how those athletic mobile quarterbacks fell in drafts and whatnot. And so is this us drafters overcompensating from missing those prior drafts? And so that's where it's also, we don't know the current draft capital and whatnot of Richardson. So that could, sway drastically one way or another. So with that right now, I think I'm going to go with Bryce Young. That can change in a month or so, but yeah, I like the stable floor relative to the upside in the Superflex.
That all makes sense. Yeah. Joe, so nothing too crazy so far. If you were in this position in a startup, it really feels like there's going to be a bit of a clamor for these top three that we've seen, and then Anthony Richardson. So if you're on the clock, do you feel like this is a real high leverage spot to be trying to trade back? Or do you feel like this is one where you've just got to sign up for whatever Anthony Richardson brings, hope that he develops more with his footwork and really, just takes that step into the NFL like we've seen players like Josh Allen do, or even Deshaun Watson? Or are you, not really that kind of embracing the risk and looking to trade back out of it?
Listen, you know me, like you said, I'm a bit of a wild card, but I'm taking that Konami code player. I'm taking somebody with the skill set of Anthony Richardson, the crazy build of Anthony Richardson, how athletic he is. I'm taking that shot. I need that Konami quarterback. I need to be able to run. I need to be able to pass. And honestly, when he starts off, if I could get the floor that Lamar Jackson gave us before the MVP season, or even like the Tim Tebow during that little run, and you knew I was going to bring up Tebow. You knew I was not going to leave him out. That's my guy. But if you could just give me that floor to start, and then you develop, like you said, we've seen it with Jalen Hurts, we've seen it with Josh Allen, we've seen this kind of move and create and be built, and it all really depends on the landing spot. So if he gets a good coach, and I don't have to worry that he's going to get buried by like a terrible coach like an Urban Meyer, thank God he's not around, but I'll take these skill sets all the time because I'm not trying to play middle of the pack. I'm not trying to come in 4th, 5th place, even 6th place. I'm trying to take over this league. And a player like Anthony Richardson, if he even comes close to the top potential, can do that.
Okay, yeah, that's really well put, Joe, because the amount of leverage he could give you if he really does turn into one of those players, it could be huge. Pat, back to you at the 105. Are you is playing out how you'd expect these things to be doing?
Yeah, I think so. I think these are the top 4 in some order. And now this kind of puts me on the horns of a dilemma. And this kind of takes me back to a conversation, sort of a debate I had with Dynasty Rich of the Dynasty Nerds on a mock draft show, where we were debating whether we would have taken Jamar Chase or Zach Wilson in a certain spot. And now, I feel like I guess in hindsight, I won the debate because I was sort of advocating for Chase and, he was advocating for Wilson. But I do agree with a lot of what Rich said that night, which was, just the quarterbacks in Superflex. Quarterbacks are the currency of Superflex. And you really have to sort of pay heed to that. So I guess that is what I'm going to do here by going with Will Levis, the guy who puts mayonnaise in his coffee. At 105, there have been Josh Allen comps, and I know that our draft analyst at FantasyPros, Thor Nystrom, doesn't think the comps to Josh Allen are entirely fair. Like Allen is a more creative runner, whereas Will Levis is just yes, he's big and pretty quick, but he's just a straight ahead guy, no elusiveness to date. But he is willing and able to run, and the guy does have a bazooka for an arm. So the tools are there, and it might take a while for him to sort of consolidate those tools into usable fantasy production, but I've got to take that shot at 105.
Yeah, I think Will Levis is going to be probably one of the most divisive players that there is out there in these rookie mock drafts for a little while. Yeah, I think some leagues you'll see him drop towards the 1.9, the 1.10 possibly. But my co-host here on Fantasy Sanctuary, Rich, he had a great line about him where Will Levis is very much like a Rorschach test. You can see what you want to see when you look at him, and people are going to interpret that differently. Yeah. But as you said, Pat, quarterbacks in Superflex Dynasty leagues, they just tend to hold their value quite well. I think even this time last year when most people were kind of out on Zach Wilson, you could probably still got an okay return on him. Folks, whilst you're here, drop us a like, hit that subscribe button, leave us a comment and tell us what you think about the picks the guys are making. 106, Chris, we're over to you. What have you got for us? If this was a real draft, would you be happy here with how the board's played out?
Yeah, personally, I like that I can have the option of either going with Gibbs or Smith-Njigba. And so I think right now I'm going to go with Gibbs. And like I said, I think it's a toss-up between the two. If there is earlier we were talking about the best player available and whatnot and what you do there. And in this case, with the throw up, I would kind of lean toward the running back because I think they've got a better chance to gain value from, where they're being drafted at this point in time. I'm thinking specifically of Kenneth Walker, who was, drafted into a committee, and I believe his ADP was around the RB20s or so, if I remember correctly. And yeah, and we saw a big spike in value from there to where he's a top 5 running back right now, and that was just due to circumstances that were easily foreseen with a Rashad Penny injury and just the cards lining up, one card fall into place. So I think that's in, the range of outcomes for Gibbs. There's obviously his size, quote unquote, concerns in which he's sub 200, but I don't see that to be the biggest concern out there especially when you combine that with his receiving ability and what he's shown over at Alabama. So with the two, I think I'm going to go with Gibbs. And like I said, there's a toss-up. So if it's Smith-Njigba, that would fit my team better. I would, have no hesitancy going that way either.
Yeah, I think that's all really nicely said. I mean, he might not be the type of player who's going to get you 20 rush attempts per game, but we don't really need him to be with the way that he can be so explosive. And I always like to think that explosive running backs tend to find a way onto the field quite early, and particularly if you're thinking about Dynasty best ball or just best ball, then that's the kind of player that I want exposure to. And even in your rookie drafts, by the time that we get down to like the fantasy playoffs, you'd like to imagine that Jahmyr Gibbs has given himself a bigger role within everything, and then you could be really hitting huge scores when it really counts in the playoffs. Joe, I mentioned it before, a lot of people seem to feel this, around this area, things start to get a bit more. You've got to really consider what you're doing. There's a tier break coming, but would you be going straight for Jackson Smith-Njigba, or would you be looking to trade out and really try and get somebody to come up and give you a ransom to take that last player before the kind of tier break?
Well, for me, I'm always willing to trade out no matter the pick. Like if it's the right package, I'm willing to trade out. Huge fan of Smith-Njigba though. And I kind of tossed it up a little bit because we're playing tight end premium here. So I was like, do I start looking at the tight ends? But that 3-cone, that short shuttle we saw, that ability that Smith-Njigba has, and if he's in a room like he was in Ohio State with that talent that was there, with Olave, with Wilson, and they're saying that he's the best guy, he's basically pro-ready in that room. He's going to be pro-ready in whatever room he gets picked up by. Don't get me wrong, I would love to see him somewhere like a Seattle, and I know that's not what people would like, but I kind of like him with Seattle. Wouldn't mind him with the Eagles, but I say that about every player, so that doesn't really hold any water here.
Okay, Pat, and over to you at the 108. Looking at this kind of like as a draft, just in 2 running backs go, 4 quarterbacks, and just a 1 wide receiver. Does it feel like we're into a nice pocket of wide receivers now, or would you be looking towards the next running backs off the board, like the Devin Achane, the Zach Charbonnets?
I do think we are sort of in the receiver zone right here, and that's probably where the value is. So I'm going to go with Quentin Johnston here, Tom. And I know some people, a lot of people actually have Jordan Addison ranked a little higher. To me, like I've always had Johnston ranked a little higher, and part of it is just roles. I mean, we've got, I think a lot of the best receivers in this class are smaller guys who are going to profile as slot receivers or small Z type receivers. Like Quentin Johnston is a classic X receiver, and there are not a lot of those in this draft. And like a big dude, 6'4", I think, and although he didn't run at the combine, and I know maybe he's not the 4.3 guy I thought he was last fall, but I also think he's got plenty of speed for a guy that big. So I really like his game. I know there's some questions. He didn't produce early last fall for TCU as they were hoping, but like he had a very strong end of the season. I know Michigan fans got a taste of what Quentin Johnston could do in the playoff semifinals. So yeah, I like Quentin Johnston here.
Yeah, he's again a sort of divisive player. Like, people criticize that he does an awful lot of body catching and he doesn't always extend and stuff. And the highlight plays are great, but I do think that there's got a good future for Quentin Johnston if he lands in the right landing spot. Personally, I think he's the kind of receiver that the Ravens could do with Lamar Jackson if they get that situation sorted out, but that's just me. Chris, back to you. The first round, it's kind of played out quite nicely. There's been a little bit of everything going off the board. And we're into the back end now. And typically, if you're picking here, you're a team who's done quite well in the previous playoffs, unless you've acquired a pick through a trade. Do you feel like this is a time where you can be thinking, okay, well, I'm just going best player available? Or do you sometimes feel like you need to really just shore up your rosters when you're in these spots?
Yeah, that's a good question. I, for one, am really big on taking the best player available. And right now, that's a toss-up for me. I really like what Jordan Addison's done in the past. Obviously his junior season over at USC wasn't as great in comparison to over at Pitt. It's really hard for me to pass up on a back with 215 and what is he, 6 feet tall. He's improved his receiving production each year that he's been at school. I think I'm going to have to go with Zach Charbonnet here. And personally, I really attract toward the wide receivers and whatnot, but he's got a full workhorse stature and everything like that to take a beating and the next level. I think he can do that. And yeah, it's just a matter of the landing spot and who his teammates are, but I think he's got a full, well-rounded set to be able to excel at the next level.
Okay, good stuff. Okay, so back to you, Joe, here with pick 10 in the first round. So this is tight end premium. This seems to be about the range where tight ends are starting to go in some of these rookie mocks. We're seeing the tight ends being mocked in actual NFL mocks up as high as sort of like the 15th, 12th picks occasionally. We haven't seen a first round tight end apart from Kyle Pitts in like the last few years. Do you feel like one of those tight ends needs to get drafted that highly for you to be comfortable taking him around this spot, or would you be comfortable with it regardless because they do seem like really good prospects?
It really just depends on the landing spot. The draft capital matters a little bit to me, but if I get a good landing spot with some of the talents, and I think you're reading my mind because I want to go tight end here, I'm going Kincaid. I'm going Dalton Kincaid here. I'm a fan of him. He reminds me of like a young Travis Kelce right now. His biggest issue is he has to put on muscle mass, and maybe it's just the fitness professional in me, but that's pretty easy to do, especially in the NFL level. You have a good strength and conditioning coach. That's doable. He's got amazing ability receiving. He's got the ability to help change an offense. I would love him in a place like, Detroit, since they don't have a TJ Hawkinson anymore, and they don't really have a lot of receivers. They have Amon-Ra St. Brown, and they have J-Mo, and that's pretty much it. I wouldn't mind a Kincaid there, but like you said, draft capital matters a little bit, but landing spot matters to me. So if he goes in the first, if he goes in the second, as long as he's on a team that has a shot to get him the ball a little bit, and especially in the tight end premium, I'm going to take that shot.
Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. I think it's going to be very interesting to see where these tight ends kind of do fall. I mean, Kincaid, my only concern would be that he's not a blocker, so it's kind of easy to see how he won't be on the field as much as somebody like a Michael Mayer who kind of is good at all facets of the game. But I definitely don't hate that pick. Pat, picking again at 111. Would you have been taking a tight end in this range, or are you kind of feeling like there's still other players with a little more positional value to you?
Yeah, Joe definitely spared me a dilemma here by taking Kincaid, because that was going to be a difficult choice for me between Kincaid and a receiver. And I do think this is the spot, like these last 3 spots in the first round. I think that's where the first tight end should peel off the board here. But I'm going to stick with wide receiver now, and I'm going to go with Jordan Addison. And, like I don't know that he is a bulletproof prospect. And, as Chris mentioned, he wasn't as impressive last year with USC as he had been at Pitt. But and I also think there were some sort of concerns about his combine performance, not running especially fast at only 173 pounds, not doing great in the jumping drills. The relative athletic score, pretty unimpressive, quite frankly. But I do think he's the kind of guy who's more like a Keenan Allen type, who did not bowl anyone over at the combine, but is just such a smooth route runner and a smooth mover that he's just going to make it work at the NFL level. The guy knows how to run routes and get open, period. And I think with a guy like that, maybe the athleticism matters just a little bit less.
Yeah, I think that's a thought that Rich Cooling, my co-host, has echoed a few times, and he's got him as his wide receiver 1 in this class, so he definitely would have been smashing the pick there. Over you, Chris, with the last pick of round 1. We've seen 3 wide receivers go, 3 running backs, 1 tight end, and 4 quarterbacks. Where are you going with this pick?
I'm going with a wide receiver. I'm debating between Downs and Hyatt. I feel like the NFL is going to love Hyatt. The speed that he brings is, near unparalleled. He wasn't that productive until, his final season, but when he did, he exploded. And what was that? Multi-touchdown game. I think it was 3 or 4 touchdowns just this last season. He's electric. But Downs is that complete profile. He's well-rounded and really, really good. He's not, exceptional at one thing, but he's really well-rounded. I think I might have to lean with what the NFL is going to think, and it's probably going to bite me in the butt, but I'm going to take a playbook from Al Davis, and we'll go with Jalen Hyatt.
Good stuff. Yeah, I think he's somebody that I'll definitely be aggressively targeting in best ball drafts if we get a good landing spot for him, because the volatility with him with those downfield targets is something which could just pay off in a huge way for best ball spike weeks if he's on the right team. So we'll move on to round 2. But first, 60% of you watching this aren't subscribed. Put a smile on my face, hit the subscribe button, check out our Twitter page for details of a subscriber giveaway that we're giving away when we get to 500. There's not many left. Get in now whilst you can. Joe, give me your first pick of the second round. And also, though, I want to hear an ideal landing spot for this player when you're giving me the player.
Man, this is a tough one because it's Superflex, but it's also tight end premium. So I kind of want to go Michael Mayer, but I also kind of want to go Hendon Hooker, because after Hooker, it drops off completely. So I think I'm going to go with the quarterback here. I'm going to go with Hooker because it's the most valuable thing in Superflex is to have quarterbacks. And he's developmental. He has the ability to Konami code when he comes back if he's healthy. I really want to see him land somewhere like a Washington maybe, or possibly a Tampa Bay, somewhere where he actually has a chance to show up and be the guy. I wouldn't even mind Detroit depending on where it falls for them. But I need somewhere where he's not going to be the guy this year. I don't see that happening for him coming off the injury, and he's a little bit of a developmental guy. But if he gets the right situation, I'm all for Hooker at this position, because after this, I don't want another quarterback probably for the rest of the draft.
I think that's a really interesting pick, and I definitely don't hate what you're saying about the value. I mean, we saw during the combine, Daniel Jeremiah just couldn't stop raving about Hendon Hooker, saying that NFL teams really love him. And in his latest draft, he had him going to the Vikings in the mid-20s. And you can really make the kind of the long play that if he's okay to sit on your taxi squad for another year, then maybe he comes back and he's fine there. Pat, picking at the 202, would you have gone Hendon Hooker if Joe hadn't, or was that a little bit ahead of where you might have been comfortable taking him?
No, we have similar thoughts on that. I think this is right around the part of the draft. I don't know whether I would have taken him or not, but it is really close to where he should be going. And I feel like he is going to be, I don't know, maybe in some mocks that I've seen, like a little bit overlooked. I think you could make a case for him in any sort of super flex format going late first, actually. So I have no complaints about that pick there. But since this is tight end premium, I'm going to have to go with Michael Mayer here. And, you said it earlier, Tom, like he is going to stay on the field because he is that complete tight end, the two-way guy who blocks well and catches well. Did not wow people with his athleticism at the combine, but boy, I seem to be on a streak of non-athletic guys who are just good football players. So, not a combine warrior, but yeah, he's going to be a plug and play starter at tight end for whoever takes him. And if you're looking for fit, well, I am a Green Bay Packers fan, and they actually, like, I would rather see them maybe bulk up on the defensive side of the ball, but they would do well with someone like Mayer because they need a tight end. They like tight ends who can block, and he can also contribute as a pass catcher. So he'd be a pretty good pick for my Green Bay Packers.
It makes an awful lot of sense to Packers, and it's probably one of the most common picks that we're seeing in mock drafts at the minute because, the Packers are still going to want to run the ball, and it's that kind of big safe target for Jordan Love if he's the quarterback this year. So definitely makes a lot of sense. Coming to you, Chris, at the 203. When you're in rookie drafts, do you tend to have areas of a draft where you're looking for particular archetypes of players more than others, or are you just best player available at all times?
I think that depends. When we go into the second round, I like, that shooting for upside and whatnot. In this case in particular, because I was so running back heavy earlier, I'm going to fall back on, actually. So, yeah. Let's go with A-Chain. I'm thinking that we're just trying to break some ceilings and, kind of like what we were saying with Gibbs. Obviously, it's a different archetype in that sense, but we're looking at two undersized backs who are both very explosive, and, we don't think that they can get, 15 touches a game and whatnot, but when they do, it's going to be explosive. And so I'm just going to be taking that shot in the second round here.
Yeah,
it was close.
I don't hate that at all. I mean, we saw him last year, 1,100 rushing yards and 200 receiving yards. So it's not a huge amount of receiving yards. It's not like he was breaking away huge runs, but he had 36 receptions on his 44 targets. So it's a pretty safe pair of hands. And if you're in PPR formats, that's going to help you out plenty when it comes to a running back. Joe, if you were at a point in the draft here where you didn't like the board, what kind of return would you be hoping for to turn this pick into a 2024 pick?
I would probably just try to get out of this draft entirely with this pick. I'm not trying to move back down the board a little bit because then you're getting a little too crazy with like trying to take shots. Let's move me the next year. Let's take it off my brain a little bit and I'll worry about it in 2024.
So who would you go with?
But I'm staying here because you're not letting me trade. So I'm staying here. And I'm sticking with Zay Flowers. And that's who I'm going with here. Big fan of Zay. Like that he put some muscle mass on. Again, might just be the fitness person in me, but I like that. It's very easy to do, so it can continue to be done. He's quick. You can move him. You can move him around. He's very quick. He's elusive. I like that about him. And it's funny because we've seen them sign a few people that are kind of like this, but if you brought him to the New York Giants, it fits right into there for me. And I like that. I wouldn't mind him on the Patriots either. Juju doesn't scare me away from them drafting a wide receiver. But I'm very big on Zay Flowers' ability to move around, and I like that he's very quick off the ball. So give me that guy. Hopefully he's not in New York. Again, Philadelphia Eagles fans, so keep him away from me. Let him go to New England. I'm fine with that.
Okay, Pat, so back to you at the 205. We're quite deep into the draft here, but out of the picks that have gone before us, is there any of these players, like probably around the back end of round one, that you could see falling to this range if they got poor draft capital?
Yeah, I mean, I could see Hyatt, I guess, is the one guy who could go. And it's just a matter of taste, I think, with sort of the Flowers, Downs, Hyatt class. And like I think those guys could kind of fall in any way, and it depends where they go. Like I've heard some speculation that Flowers could sneak into the first round, which would certainly spike him up to the first round of rookie drafts. But I do think there's going to be some ambiguity there depending on landing spots. So for here, oh man, I had A-Chain like pegged for this spot, and Chris just totally broke my heart. Like I'm such a big A-Chain fan. He totally reminds me of Warwick Dunn. So I kind of wanted to get him here, but man, I'm just going to keep hitting this deep tight end class, and I'm going to go with Luke Musgrave here, a guy who is a huge supporter on in my Fantasy Pros Dynasty podcast co-host Scott Bogman, who just loves Musgrave and thinks he might have the highest ceiling of any tight end in this class because of his combination of height. He's 6'6", I believe, and athleticism, like really fast. Had some injury issues, like didn't play as many games as you would have liked to have seen, but tested great at the combine, and he is definitely an athletic specimen. So I have to break my streak of drafting unathletic guys with Luke Musgrave.
Yeah, I mean, when you've got a tight end who's over 250 pounds and he's doing a 40-yard dash in 4.6, I mean, that's pretty good. I think he's definitely somebody with a very high ceiling, and at 6'6", yeah, he's going to be a quarterback's best friend. I know that's a bit of a trope, but I can definitely see that one playing out with him. Chris, when you're at this kind of point in the draft, and it seems like these are kind of picks which are sometimes a little bit easier to accumulate. Like you might have 2 or 3 seconds in a draft when you're on a rebuild, whereas like the firsts are always a lot harder. When you've got a bunch of picks in this kind of section of drafts, do you try to diversify the players that you're taking across your rookie draft? So is it always just, these are my guys, I'm just going to hammer these and hope it pays off?
Yeah, I'm a big diversification guy because with rookies, we just never know if they're going to hit or not. It's just as simple as that. And so I think the easiest way to mitigate that risk is just to, increase your exposure across all these guys. And so that's one of the big things for sure. And with this, knowing your league mates is one of the big things in drafts and whatnot and trading. So with me in a draft room with the unpredictable Joe, who's loving the tight ends, I think I'm going to have to pick up Darnell Washington before Joe gets him next.
Excellent.
What do we say? Yeah, this dude is just an athletic specimen. He's awesome. And the way that he was pushing those sleds should have just boosted him up 5 more draft spots. So yeah, we'll take the big athletic tight end, and hopefully in 2 years he can do something relevant to my team.
Okay, so Joe, over to you. There's been a tight end run. Are you going to carry on with tight end, or are you going to scoop up some value that's fallen to you now?
I'm just mad that he took the guy I was going to take. I seen him hit that sled, and I was like, okay, I'm taking him everywhere I possibly can. I didn't even care that he catch a ball or anything. He hit the sled like it was a 2-pound toy. So I was all about
and
him.
his one-hand catch though too. That can't forget about
he's
that.
Wild. He's wild. It's insane. But I am going to stick with the tight end here. I kind of between him and Josh Downs, but I'm going to go with Sam Laporta. I'm a big fan of him. I like him. His yards after catch, it's really intriguing to me. Cowboys lost Dalton Schultz. That'd be a great place for him to land in if it all worked out draft capital wise and all that fun stuff. But I like him a lot. He catches a little weird sometimes, but I feel like that could be taught. You can learn that depending on where you go. I like Sam Laporta. I like yards after catch. And in the tight end premium league, I am going to hammer this position home because it's a hard position. After the top couple of like Kelsey and Mark Andrews, so we don't even know if he'll be amazing without Lamar. I said it just for you. It's a tough position. It's a landmine after a while. So give me a few options that could possibly pop off, and then I'm lucky. I'm just hoping.
Cool. Okay, so Pat, back to you with the 208. What's your kind of ethos with players falling past ADP? Like, that's a method that, like, particularly in best ball drafts, I subscribe to a lot. Like, I want those players when they fall past ADP. Do you go into that kind of mindset when it comes to rookie drafts as well?
Yeah, I guess it sort of depends on the landscape of each draft, Tom. So there's no set answer for a different year. I mean, I might be, but at this point, I mean, it's almost where you have to hit the talent veins where they can be found. And I mean, these guys kind of just crushed me here because I was looking at either Darnell Washington or Sam Laporta. I mean, like, Darnell Washington, yeah, never mind that he was only the second best tight end at Georgia. I mean, what he did at the combine was just remarkable. And I mean, juxtaposed against those other tight ends trying to move the sled where they were moving it a couple feet, and like Washington could have moved it from like Indianapolis to Bloomington if you wanted him to. And then Laporta, I mean, just wait till he gets in the NFL and actually has a quarterback who can throw a spiral instead of the Iowa quarterbacks. I mean, as a Big Ten fan, like, that guy had to deal with such hideous quarterbacking during his stay. So would have loved to get one of those guys. Instead, I'm going to have to go for another guy who's got me pretty excited. Roschon Johnson, the other University of Texas running back. And just like another class where we've got a lot of smaller backs, a lot of guys who profile maybe as more third down guys, pass catchers. Roschon is just this big brute, and he can be an early down guy, but he also catches passes. Really wowed people at the Senior Bowl, apparently, and I think he like broke a bone in his hand or something, and that was on day one after he had just like turned heads and gotten everyone excited about him, and then I think he still wanted to practice in day two, and they were like, "No, man, you broke a bone in your hand, you're done." So you gotta love seeing that sort of desire. I like Roschon a lot. I think he's sneaky. I know Cody Carpentier of Player Profiler thinks that he is going to be drafted ahead of Zach Charbonnet. That's Cody's big call, which would surprise a lot of people. But he laid out a pretty good case for it, and I could see it.
It's a really interesting pick, isn't it? Because, like, yeah, he's probably never going to be like your 3-down workhorse running back, maybe, but he could definitely be one of those really useful running backs who's part of like a tandemship, someone, that has fantasy value in good weeks and stuff, and is a really reliable runner. I mean, he was over 5 yards per attempt on all 4 years that he was in college. Okay, coming to Chris, 209, got a couple of picks left. Any player leaping off the page for you here, Chris?
Yeah. I'm gonna smash Josh Downs now, as I was talking about earlier. Just a solid, well-rounded player. He's got a 35% dominator rating, so he's shown that he can be a solid, constant producer at any stage. I think he had a little bit of a QB carousel, if I remember correctly, over there at NC. So he's a guy that I'm really looking forward to, and I believe that he's fallen a little bit in this draft, actually, with the tight end premium, maybe not as much. But yeah, I really like Downs here, and I think he's going to be a solid contributor to an NFL team. To which one that is, I'm not sure, but I can see second-round draft capital from him.
Well, the way the Giants are hoovering up every slot wide receiver, maybe they'll just draft him as well and really party. Joe, your last pick, you got anything crazy for us here?
I like that that's my position for this job, just give all the crazy picks. I'm all for that. But no, I'm going, and it might be crazy. I don't know. I have started to really warm up to Kendra Miller. Big fan of him. Think he could be a bell cow size, speed, burst. I see it all when I watch him. The guy could it's effortless, left to right for me. This might just be the homer in me speaking, but I wouldn't mind him in Philadelphia. We did sign Rashad Penny, but the man is often hurt. We didn't really sign him for much. I like Kenneth Gainwell, but not great capital for him. And then Boston Scott, how he keeps coming back to our team, I don't know, but we'll use him 2 weeks out of the season against the Giants and be happy with it. So I'd be fine if Miller showed up in Philadelphia. I would like him there. I think he's got the ability to be a bell cow.
I think Miller's one of those interesting ones. He's never really shown elite route running ability, but he can catch the ball, and it's really just that's all you need sometimes. If you've got a quarterback who's going to pass the ball to you a lot as a running back, you've immediately got a lot more value than a lot of other players. Pat, coming to you for the 211. What kind of return would you need in 2024 picks to trade out of this position completely?
Oh man, I would probably trade this pick for absolutely for any second. Maybe even like 2/3. I think, boy, from about the mid second round to the end of the third round, like it's just such a flat tier, I think, of value here. And especially at running back, where we've got like 31 flavors of like, there are all these guys, we're never going to get through them all. So I'll just name some of the guys like who you could consider here, like Eric Gray, Sean Tucker, Tyjae Spears, Tank Bigsby. Joe took the guy. It came down to two guys for me. I would have taken, it would have been between Kendre Miller and the guy who I'm going to take, Evan Hull of Northwestern. And my colleague Derek Brown is a big Evan Hull fan, and he has got me excited about him. And I guess I kind of wrote him off because Northwestern has just been so bad for the last 2 years. I mean, the only two decent players they've had on offense are Evan Hull and Joe's ideal pick for the Eagles, Peter Skoronski. But as far as skill players, like Evan Hull has been the offense for Northwestern the last couple of years. I believe he led all FBS receivers in catches last year. So as Thor Nystrom of FantasyPros has said, like, we know what he's going to be in the NFL. Like, he's going to be a third down guy, but he also has the ability to give you some help on the early downs. And I did not expect him to go sub 4 or 5 at the combine, and he did. So, he backed up his the skills, the traits he has as a pass catcher with like some pretty impressive athleticism. So high character kid too. I think he's one of the more promising guys in this deep running back class.
Okay, so Chris, last pick of the second round, last pick of this mock draft. Any thought at all to Kayshon Boutte here, or is he just plummeting way past this point?
I mean, I, kind of thought that one of us was going to scoop him up, but yeah, since I haven't either, I guess there's not much that I can talk about there. But yeah, I mean, he flashed as a freshman and he looked good. It sounded like there was some coaching kind of dilemmas between him and Kelly, I believe it was. So it seems like that played a big role in not being able to produce. He also got injured. That being said, I'm gonna have to go with Tyjae Spears here. He had 200 pounds. He put up 1,500 yards, and every year he improved as a receiving back as well. Like, it's not otherworldly, but what was it, 5-2 and then 19 and 22 receptions? Like, that's improvement each year. So yeah, I think he's got a good role. He's solid, and yeah, hopefully the landing spot can give us a little bit more something. But yeah, he's also a big best ball target of mine. So yeah, hopefully Tyjae Spears works out well.
He definitely seems to be the player that, like, after the Senior Bowl and stuff, like, he became a bit of a Twitter darling, and with the right landing spot, you could easily see his ADP creep well up above that, I think. So looking back at the draft there, Pat, any particular picks that really stand out to you? Anything that you really like, and any players that you'd be really looking to target in the early third?
Boy, I think the value is still a running back in the third. I mean, just that big wave of guys who could go. Still guys like, I suppose Bigsby would probably be next for me. Eric Gray, Zach Evans, Sean Tucker, Chase Brown, like a lot of those guys. That's kind of where the value is. There's one, I do like the bigger receivers. I'm maybe a lot higher than other people are on Jonathan Mingo, who just like maybe the toughest guy with the ball in his hand. Reminds me sort of like almost like a bigger Debo. And I also know he's got huge hands and, timed pretty well in the 40 at the combine. So those guys, and just the draft generally, I mean, it kind of went, there weren't really any major surprises here. Like, I don't think anyone dropped my jaw with any of the picks they made, especially in tight end premium. Dang. I think the tight ends kind of came out when we expected them to. We saw the quarterback run early on as we expected. for the most part, I think we stayed pretty close to the chalk and didn't color outside the lines too much.
Cool. Joe, okay, how'd you feel about the draft? And out of the picks you made, is there one of these players that if you were in a startup draft, you'd be prioritizing heavily? Like, is there any of these players who you really believe in?
Well, first things first, I love every pick I've ever made ever. So let's just skip past that one. But I really wanted Darnell Washington. Again, if we're doing like a startup draft, it's way down the line a little bit for me. But, Anthony Richardson, I might just have a man crush on him. I don't know if it's just me. But, I think that his ceiling is going to come. I don't think it's going to be this year. So anybody who's listening to this, don't think that I'm saying in 2023. But I think almost like a Jalen Hurts, he could take that step. And if he takes that step, he's got tools like no other. And it's just somebody I crave. Like how you were so big on Trey Lance a couple years ago, I'm this big on Anthony Richardson. I can't help it.
Okay, right. So seems to have lost Chris, unfortunately. But thank you, everybody, for watching. You follow Joe on Twitter at JPEP20. You follow Chris on Twitter at Chris Reelfs. That's REELFS. All be in the comments below. Pat, I know you've been swamped so much with Fantasy Pros content coming thick and fast at you as well as other podcasts. So really, thank you very much for coming on. Follow Pat Fitz_FF on Twitter. This was Fantasy Sanctuary. Leave us a like and a comment. Tell us which picks you really liked. Make sure you subscribed, and we'll be back soon with lots more Rookie Dynasty and Best Ball content.